I need to see you in my office immediately.
We've received your test results. Please call your doctor ASAP to discuss the matter.
Hey, honey, just so you know, my mom is planning to stay with us an extra 2 weeks. Welcome aboard, passengers. We'd like to share a special welcome to all the babies on board. No services for 63 miles and the gas gauge just popped on. Fantastic. Hey, we need to talk.
All right, let's talk. All right, does the rain stress you out? Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you too. I am not as stressed as some. If you would like a copy of the outline, would you raise your hand? Welcome, by the way, Victorville, Apple Valley, Hesperia. Where else do we have people watching in Phelan? Appreciate all of our sites and the ministry God does through those different groups of people, parts of our congregation here at High Desert Church, and we're always blessed to have you here in Victorville. Do you feel blessed to be here? Hey, all right, that's good, that's good. You passed. Yeah, rainy days and Mondays always get me down. Not today, though. We're going to talk about stress, and we're going to talk about it for a few months. We have been working an Oikos model of ministry for about as long as we've been here, which is 31 years. And you know what that means. It means God has given you your own world. He's given you your own people to minister God's grace to. And our mission in leadership here for our church family is to help you identify who they are and then grow in your faith so that you could demonstrate your faith in Christ in a manner that would be attractive. Now, the reason why a lot of folks have a hard time engaging their oikos, a lot of Christians, is because their oikos doesn't see much of a difference in their Christian friends as they might be watching their Christian friends and their non-Christian friends, and there really is no separation there. There's no difference in the way we live our lives from the way the world lives theirs. The world is like so stressed, and you turn on the television, you watch the news, you read the paper, you don't have to do any of those things. Just drive down the street. I mean, people are angry, and Christians seem to be too. This, you guys, could be a game changer, not just because we want to help you enjoy God's grace as God designed His grace to be enjoyed, but we want you to have an impact in the lives of the people around you. And if you're not attractive, and I don't mean you don't look good or you don't smell good or you don't dress right, what I mean is there is almost a defeatist attitude that a lot of believers have. And I see it all the time, and I see it at times here at HDC. We travel, Cheryl and I, quite a bit, and see it in many congregations. It's like they're just done with life. They can hardly wait for the Lord to come back. Not for the right reasons, but for the wrong reasons. So they don't have to be depressed anymore, which is not a good reason to anticipate the return of Christ. Okay, having said that, this series is about different ways to enhance our state of mind and heart by encouraging our bodies to function as God designed them. Now, we're going to talk about laughter today. God designed us to laugh. We talk about joy. And I thought it would be appropriate if, you can't preach about laughter without telling a joke, right? Right? That'd be stupid. I didn't even think about that. I don't even have a joke to tell you. But anyway, we'll still smile at least, if maybe not laugh today. Because there are things about laughter that really aren't funny, especially if you don't enjoy that side of life enough. God designed us all, you guys, to live in balance. We talk about balance all the time here at our church. Got to be balanced. There's spiritual balance that a church family must also enjoy. The body of Christ has been heavily damaged over the last couple of thousand years by theological views that are not balanced. They're just extreme. And so they're now, as a church around the world, all claim to follow Jesus, but we're divided because we're not balanced. And God has built into the system of his church different opinions, different views, different ideas, different gifts, so that we come together and we find balance with one another. In a family, God designed families to operate in a balanced way, which is why you don't agree with your spouse on very much. It's not that your spouse is an idiot, it's that we all can be. And we need that other voice speaking into our lives to kind of bring us off, the edge of the plank there so that we can see life in a balanced way. So we embrace those differences. Well, the body, the human body, is a reflection of that as well. In fact, it's an example of how God's kingdom is supposed to operate in balance. You see, when one biological system works too hard for too long, another biological system within the same body kicks in to provide balance. For example, your body heats up when you exercise. And if it heats up too much, you're going to do damage to your body, which is why God built into the fabric of our biology the need to exercise, but also the ability to sweat. You don't tell yourself to sweat. You're not working out and say, okay, man, I'm really hot. It'd be good if I sweat now. Your body just does. Why? Because those are two different systems that God designed in us to operate in balance with one another. When you consume too much sugar, not that you do. But when you do, your body produces insulin to keep you from going into some kind of toxic shock, to fall into a coma. Because sugar and insulin balance one another. And those of you who struggle with diabetes, we have type 1s in our family, and so we know all about that. And when you're a diabetic, you're taking meds because you are unable to provide the right kind of balance between those systems. It's not your fault, it's just part of living in a fallen world where the balance God has built into the fabric of everything he designed is just a little bit off. You don't tell your body, okay, I need some insulin now while you're popping down the birthday cake. It just happens. Gotta have balance to survive. See, so much of what we experience spiritually is inextricably connected to what we experience physically. And when we talk about stress, we can talk about stress in a spiritual conversation, but we have to also bring in the biological part of the conversation because God designed us physically and spiritually, and they connect. Dealing with stress is a matter of balance, not just in our schedules and in our lives, but it's also a matter of biology. If you are stressed, and everybody is to some degree, but if you would say, oh man, I'm just so overwhelmed right now, your problem is not that stress hormones have been deployed in your brain chemistry. Your problem is that the system that God provided you, designed in you to bring your stress into balance, has been compromised. And when we're overwhelmed, it's not that we have this abundance of stress. We have blocked, because of certain behaviors, we have blocked the body's ability to deploy those tranquility hormones to keep our stress in balance. And it's all biological. It's all in our brains. Dr. Archibald Hart, who's obviously a doctor, he's a counselor, a psychologist, also a professor at Fuller Theological Seminary, wonderful guy, sat in one of his seminars not too long ago, and afterwards I went up. It was on anxiety, and I didn't even know how much anxiety I was feeling until I heard him tell me. And I went up afterwards, and I was actually broken. I was in tears, and I said, Dr. Hart, I just got to tell you, you have no idea how much I needed to hear what you had to say today. Now, I don't know if this series is going to provide for you anything like that provided me. But I want you to understand how this works. And Dr. Hart would call those tranquility hormones, he calls them happy messengers. And I know that's kind of a silly way to describe part of this biology. But your brain has to always figure out how to give happy messengers, tranquility hormones, the freedom to find their way to what we could call massage centers in the brain, to alleviate those stress hormones from taking over our lives. In layman's terms, stress depletes our natural brain tranquilizers. And the fact is, whether or not you've ever taken meds, we're all on tranquilizers. Now keep in mind, stress and worry are two different things. We'll talk about worry in a few weeks, and worry can lead to stress. Worry, among other things, leads to stress. But worry is not stress. Worry is sin. That's what Jesus said, and I think Jesus was right about everything, so we're just gonna go with that. But worry is a choice that we make. Stress, on the other hand, happens. It's pure biology. Stress is never our problem. Overstress is our problem. A stress response can actually save your life. You smell smoke in the middle of the night. Your body immediately kicks into gear and you are stressed. And because of that stress, you might save every life under that roof that night. Stress helps you function at a high level. You're stressed over a test, a big exam that you're going to take. That's good that you're stressed because it's got you focused. Your body's on alert. You're tuned in. But those same hormones that provide good stress need to be brought back into balance within a relatively short amount of time. Because if they aren't, then you're in trouble. See, eustress, which is good stress, that's the term, that we immediately feel when we have to be in alert mode, that those same chemicals that provide you to be focused and on top of your game begin to gradually take over unless those tranquility hormones, that balancing system kicks in to provide balance. And the time frame, by the way, is about 2 to 4 weeks. That if you are unable to kind of kick in that balancing system, this stress, which at first is proactive, you're doing good things with it, well, within a matter of days, it becomes protective, where you start to circle the wagons and you kind of lock yourself in and tune the world out. Some of you are in that phase, aren't you? And if we can't deal with that effectively, then we get to the next phase, which is escape. Got to get away from it all. Got to get away from my marriage. Got to get away from my family. Got to get away from my job. I just got to get away. And some of you today might be at that point. And then if you don't deal with it effectively, you fall into depression. And what is happening is those hormones, primarily cortisol, is taking over your mind because the balancing system God gave you is not functioning well. Now, certain things create this overabundance of cortisol. Let me show you what they are. And this is research, so I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher, I just read a lot, and I'm fairly observant. A lack of sleep produces cortisol. Overstimulation, that is, you're always being stimulated. There's never a break. You're always having a conversation. Even when, you know how you used to drive and just talk to yourself? Well, now you're talking to everybody. And you're texting while you're driving, which is really dumb. You know, I don't even know what to tell you if that's what you do. But then, right now, you're trying to hear from the Lord. You're trying to track what Pastor Tom is saying. Some of you are emailing now. You're responding to messages now. Or you're looking at your different apps that provide pictures of everyone and everything that's happened in the last few days. And because they posted, now you got to post, right? It almost becomes a game. Sometimes it's a competition. It's called overstimulation. And then there's just to be excited all the time. I mean, hey, you guys, let's get excited, right? How about pleasure seeking? Always looking for another party, always looking for another high, always looking to have fun. And then conflict in relationships. Those things produce cortisol. Those things produce stress hormones. Now, let me just ask you a question. Do you understand now why our society has gone crazy? Why they're so stressed? Why there's so much anxiety? You guys, these are a virtue in our culture. I mean, if you are not always, connected, if you are not always getting excited, if you're not always looking for the next party, the next high, the next whatever, if you're not like aggressive and assertive, even if it means that people are going to be offended and will lead to conflict, there's something wrong with you. You're just not an American. You got to be a red-blooded American. This is how red-blooded Americans operate, which is why we're stressed. Now, if those things are true, and they are, then they're opposites. Their counterparts provide your body the chance to bring renewed biological balance to your brain. You know how your body will produce those tranquility hormones? Through sleep. By the way, you need, statistically now, research indicates you need 9 hours of sleep a night in order to replenish your tranquility hormones. You say, well, forget that. Can we move on to number 2? How about simplicity? How about relaxation? How about living a life of discipline? How about a gentle response to people who aren't treating you fairly? How about laughter? Research indicates these things provide the deployment of tranquility hormones to balance out your cortisol. Most of you go days, weeks, months without these things in your life, which is why you're about ready to be done with everything. Can you recall Jesus ever teaching on these subjects, by the way? You know why he taught so much on these ideas? You know why he modeled these ideas? Because he designed your brain to live in a balanced way in a stressful world. He made you. It's funny because I often say truth is true no matter where it comes from. I mean, it is what it is. And by the way, truth is always true. Theories are not always true, but facts are facts. And you got a theologian sitting at a table with a scientist, you got an archaeologist, you got an astronomer, you got a social researcher here, you got all of these guys having conversations. And if they are speaking truth, they all agree with one another because truth is true. Which is why after all the research is in, we see that Jesus has been on top of this for a while. What if I told you that I could provide you something free? It's simple, it's not complicated, and it is free. I'm telling you, it's free, and you will enjoy it. And this is what it's going to do for you. It's going to lower your heart rate, reduce your stress, enhance your mood. You're going to be in a better mood. You're going to be more productive. You're going to trust people more. You're going to generate the empathy of others. In other words, people are going to love you more. Your physical pain will be lessened. You'll have an increased focus on your daily schedule. You'll be more attractive. You're going to look better. You're going to get a raise. You're going to look younger, you're going to live longer, and your immune system will be bolstered with this one gift. What if I told you I could provide that for you? You would say, Tom, sign me up. I need it now. That's why today we want to talk about laughter, because this is what laughter provides you. This is not about forcing yourself to laugh. It's not about, okay, let's all force ourselves to smile, put on a happy face. This is talking about giving yourself the chance to actually laugh, to feel the joy that God wants you to feel. And once again, we talk about truth being true. So after all of the research that led us to all the things that we've talked about in this introduction, we still wind up in the book of Proverbs where Solomon said this: a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. I found it interesting in my, surveying the scriptures over the last couple of weeks, preparing for today. I found it interesting that the woman whom Solomon describes as a spiritual model for wives and mothers everywhere, that Proverbs 31 woman, when you read that section of Proverbs, it's like she's so busy, she must be stressed out, right? But verse 25 says she's clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. Which brings us to our text for this series. It's just a relatively short section of Philippians. It's a great one, and we're going to look at just one part of it today. It's Philippians chapter 4, verse 4, and this is the statement that we want to look at this time. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Okay, let's say that out loud together. You see it on screen? Okay, some of you have your Bibles open, that's fine. If you need to read it, read it. Let's say it together. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. One more time, let's say it again. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Okay, everybody on your feet. You're just not energetic enough for me today, and you're starting to stress me out, okay? So we're standing up, got the blood flowing, kind of loosen up a little bit. All right, one more time. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Once more. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Have a seat. And while you're sitting down, let's say it again. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. You say, why do we have to say it again? Because it says so. I will say it again. I mean, every time you read that verse, you got to read it again. Or else you failed the test. I want to start at the very beginning of that and give you some ideas. We're going to pull more out of that verse than you thought was there. But I want to start this way. Let's look at the first word, rejoice, and fill in some blanks. This is what it means to rejoice. To respond to bad news in great ways. Respond to bad news in great ways. I just want to say categorically, I love all you guys, and I'm the eternal optimist. I'm seldom down for very long. I can be discouraged, but it's usually short-lived discouragement. I will tell you though, and I will include myself in this statement, I will tell you that everybody in this auditorium, any of the auditoriums that are listening in today, anywhere you're listening, online, whatever, you're going to get bad news this week. You just are. For some of you, it's not going to be that bad. I mean, I saw Tom Brady and Des Bryant sitting in the audience over here. How about those Cowboys? And how about those boys? I just want to say there's a pretty good chance. I kind of like Cowboys, pretty good chance some of you guys are going to get bad news this week. I don't know if you're an Ohio State fan. I can pretty much guarantee you're going to get bad news tomorrow night. Sorry, just say it. I don't know. I'm a UCLA fan. I know what bad news is, okay? Thank the Lord I'm not an SC fan. Oh, gee. Okay, let's close in prayer. pushing the limits of propriety there. But you know, sometimes the bad news we get isn't that bad. I mean, you got to get over it. I mean, after all, it's just a game. But then there are times that the news really is bad. We've lost some of the most wonderful people in our church family over the last few weeks during the holidays. Some of the long-term saints of our church family have left. Great news for them. Not so great for us. How do you rejoice? You respond to bad news in great ways. See, Ray Johnson put it that way. Some of you are familiar with Ray. He's pastor of Bayside Church up in Sacramento. He's got a book, several books, but one of his books is entitled The Hope Quotient. I sat in on one of his talks down in Orange County a few weeks ago. He's a friend of our church, and that's how he puts this idea of bouncing back, of picking yourself up. He says this is a good way to say it, and I agree with him, and that's why I stole it from him today. Respond to bad news in great ways. You see, there's something going on in the Philippian church. When we get to chapter 4, verse 4, and we say, rejoice in the Lord always, I will say it again, rejoice. By the way, let's say that out loud again together. Rejoice in the Lord always, I will say it again, rejoice. Thank you. When we get to that verse 4, there's 1, 2, and 3 that occurred before 4, which is kind of a pattern you see in the Bible. Every time you get to a verse 4, there's probably 3 verses before it at least. So we look at verse 1 of chapter 4, and this is what Paul says. He says, therefore, my brothers and sisters, you whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, dear friends. Stand firm. I plead, verse 2, I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. Yes, I ask you, my true companion, help these women since they have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel. I've been working with them for years. They have been great co-ministers with me in the ministry in Philippi. Paul speaking. along with Clement and the rest of my coworkers whose names are in the book of life. You see, there is a problem in the Philippian church. These gals, these two gals, Euodia and Syntyche, they have been working side by side and in a spirit of unity for a long time. And something has happened. There has been an aberration in that unified vibe of ministry, that joy that they experienced for so long. Something has divided them. And it's such a big deal that the entire church family has been affected. And now the church in Philippi is starting to line up. Some say, well, I think Euodia is right, and some say Syntyche, and one's more right than the other. And there are groups within the congregation that are feeling more sympathy or empathy for one or the other, and it's just become a mess. The Philippian church is no different than your family. You know, marriages break up, and then families, extended families, then they all take sides, right? It's not just the two of you. I mean, it creates, ripple effects of division. That's why we maintain those primary relationships in our lives, because there are so many people who are affected by what we are either able or incapable of doing relationally. It happens in small groups. Some of you have experienced this in your small groups. There's been a difference of opinion. Maybe it's a theological view. Maybe it's a social view. Maybe it's just something that happened and somebody got their feelings hurt, their feathers ruffled. And so all of a sudden there's this little crack, and then it becomes a great divide, and then you want to get out of the group. It happens in churches. Churches split. It can happen in any ministry. And this is the thing, I always tell people, man, what are your expectations for those relationships? Never make the mistake of miscalculating your situation. You got to look at it through the lens of realism. Things happen. Divisive conversations occur. Disruptive issues evolve. It happens. Bad news is going to happen. It might happen in your family. It might happen in your small group. But you have to respond in a great way. You see, this is the problem we have in our lives. It's a matter of mathematics, simple math. You take an already imperfect environment, which the world is. We live in a fallen world. And let's just say, for the sake of our discussion, that circumstances over the course of a given day will all work out for you 1 day out of 3. So a third of the time you're going to have a good day, as long as nobody's involved in it. But then you put people who also have imperfections in that day. You see, that day is a convoluted combination of imperfections. Let's just say that all of the people in your life have a 333 lifetime batting average. That is, that they do things right a third of the time. You say, well, that's not very often. Are you kidding me? 333, a lifetime batting average of 333 puts you in the Hall of Fame. And then let's say you add up. By the way, we don't add, you say, this is what we say, oh, these things all add up. They never add up. They multiply against one another. Statistically, you got that imperfect environment, you throw all of these 333 lifetime batters into that environment, and then you put yourself in there. And you're also batting 333, which means you do everything right a third of the time. You're a Hall of Famer too. You don't add that up. Statistically, you multiply it out, which, look at this number. That means that your world is going to go your way 4 out of every 10,000 opportunities. Okay? Now, I'm optimistic, but I'm also realistic. You know what that means? 1 day out of every 2,500 days, you're going to have a good day. Never confuse where you live on earth with where you're going to spend eternity. This is not heaven. I tell you all the time, it's Victorville. It doesn't matter where you live. We all have to face bad news. A lot. Evidently, 2,499 days out of 2,500 days, we're going to face some type of bad news. Doesn't matter how rich you are, how healthy you are, how smart you are, it's coming. I mean, what good is being rich if you're depressed? What good is having good health if you're depressed? What good is being smart if you're depressed? Why do healthy, wealthy, smart people get depressed? For the same reason that poor, sick, and not so smart people get depressed. Because they haven't learned to live in those other 2,499 days by responding to bad news in great ways. There's an old parable about a mule that had to step up. One day this mule falls into a ditch and he can't get out. And the farmer, who's had the mule for a long time and is getting kind of old himself, he can't get him out of the ditch either. So he decided the best way to deal with the situation was to simply bury the mule right there and then in the ditch. Which, of course, did not please the mule. But after a few shovelfuls of dirt were thrown on his back, the mule realized something. He could get out of the ditch by simply shaking the dirt off his back each time another shovelful came down. And then every time another shovelful came down, he would take a step up. We talk all the time about living our lives under the circumstances. How you doing? Well, I'm doing fine under the circumstances. Well, what are you doing under the circumstances? Shake that dirt off your back, girl. Shake that dirt off your back, son, and step up. Respond to bad news in great ways. The word joy refers to that ability. It means, the Greek verb means to rejoice, used 72 times. The noun form, chara, is just joy. Rejoice, the verb, joy, the noun. Use the noun 60 times, the verb 72. That's 132 times in the New Testament. That is our challenge. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. 132 times. Rejoice was a common social greeting. It meant be calmly happy. So how do you maintain your calmness, your joy, when 2,499 times out of 2,500, your day is not going to go completely like you hoped it would? Years ago, Robert Schuler's then teenage daughter lost a leg in a tragic accident. Some of you may know the story. This is years ago, of course. And Dr. Schuler writes this. He says, the summer after her accident, she shocked me by saying, Dad, I'm going to sign up for softball again this year. She only had one leg. That's great, I responded, not wanting to discourage her. At that time, her artificial leg was attached just below the knee, which was so stiff she could barely bend it at a 30-degree angle. She walked very stiffly. Running was out of the question. However, I took her to the local school where all the parents were lining up with their daughters to register for the girls' softball team. Carol signed up, went to check out her uniform, and as she swung her stiff plastic leg into the car and rested her jersey, socks, and cap in her lap, I turned to her and I said, Carol, how do you expect to play softball if you can't run? With flashing eyes, she snapped back. When you hit home runs, Dad, you don't have to run. You know, some people respond to great news in bad ways. You know those kind of people? You tell them something that you're pretty excited about, and all you get is cold water poured on your little idea, coming up with all the reasons why your dream is a stupid dream, or your plan won't work, or what you thought was a win is really a loss. You know what that is? That's discouraging. Some people have the gift of discouragement. The purpose of their lives is to simply be a warning to others. That's what some people do. Most people respond to great news in great ways and bad news in bad ways. Things go well, they respond greatly. Things go poorly, they respond poorly. That's typical. That's the overwhelming number of people on both sides of the aisle, believer, non-believer. Very few people respond to bad news in great ways. But when you respond to bad news in great ways, you know what you do? You inspire people. A few years back, a guy charged his heart surgery to his American Express card. And in so doing, he earned hundreds of thousands of frequent flyer miles. And then his insurance company sent him a check to cover the surgery. So he paid off his credit card and then spent a month recovering in Europe free of charge. I love that story. Responding to bad news in great ways. Rejoice. Rejoice. But there's more in that verse. We not only told to rejoice, we're told to rejoice how? We're told to rejoice in the Lord. So let's remember that Jesus, fill in the blanks. Let's remember that Jesus is the source of balance. Jesus is the source of balance because that's what the verse says. Rejoice in the Lord. By the way, let's say it out loud together. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. You want me to make you stand up again? Let's try it again. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Now this time let's put the emphasis on that phrase, in the Lord. So let's just start softly. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. A few months ago I shared an idea that Andy Stanley wrote in his book entitled Deep and Wide. I actually got quite a bit of feedback on this quote, and so I was glad I had included it because it ministered to some of you. But this is the quote: time in erodes awareness of. Now, if you weren't here, or if you don't remember that, you're probably wondering, what does it even mean? Well, this is the point. When you're in a relationship, when you're in a situation, when you're in a job, when you're in any circumstance, for sufficient amount of time, you begin to lose the ability to recognize how blessed you are. Some of you have been married for a long time, and you're starting to lose your edge in terms of what a blessing your spouse is. And you begin to become more critical and more cantankerous rather than being thankful for the fact that God has given you that gift. You were thankful before, but you're starting to lose the edge of gratitude. And that's true in everything. Can be true, like I say, in a job. Can be true in a church. You can be at HTC so long, you really forget the blessing it is to be a part of a church family like High Desert Church. Could happen to me. I mean, I could take you guys for granted. I think one of the reasons why the Lord sends me all over the world now to speak in a lot of different church contexts and have conferences with pastors and talk to pastors about all the problems they have in their church is to remind me, man, HTC is a great church. This is the best church in the world, you guys, and I've been around the world. I know that, as a matter of fact. I've done the research. Just saying. But this is the problem for some of you. Time in erodes awareness of. And there are two groups of people who make up the majority of this audience. Now, there's a relatively small group of you out there who haven't yet trusted Jesus with your life, so you have no idea what it means to live a life in relationship with God through Christ. But the majority of you have been a Christian for a long time. In fact, you've been a Christian so long, you've forgotten what a blessing it is to even be a Christian, which is why you complain to God more now than you did at the beginning. Because at the beginning, when that burden that you carried for so long of your sin and your guilt was lifted off your shoulders, you couldn't say anything but good things about God. But now you've been in the game for a while, right? And so now you want things to happen a little more quickly. And you're just cranky. And that's what happens. Because time in erodes awareness of. And this is why the psalmist said this. Look what Psalm 103, verse 2. Praise the Lord, my soul, and forget not all his benefits. Now, let me just ask you this before we go any further. Did King David ever have a bad day? Well, what do we remember about God? He forgave all our sins, healed our diseases. He redeems our life from the pit, from hell, by the way, and crowns you with love and compassion. He satisfies your desires with good things so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. You know what he says? You can't forget that stuff. See, that's why the apostle didn't just tell the Philippian church, hey, come on, smile. Come on, laugh. Come on, rejoice. Because rejoicing is always connected to Jesus. We rejoice in the Lord. He's the one who designed you. He's the one who has promised to never allow anything to happen to you that would overwhelm those systems he designed. You know, we talk about the stress deployment system, and then we talk about the tranquility deployment system. I mean, Jesus designed that. Look at what God says to the Apostle Paul, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. God is faithful. Faithful for what? To be consistent with the way he built us. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. He will never cause a situation to come into your life where you're going to lose your balance. But when you are tempted, he also provides a way out so that you can endure it. He also provides instruction, a pathway to follow, so that now you can bring balance back to what is overwhelming you. But you got to always recognize it's because of Jesus. So here's number 3, fill in these blanks. Resolve to see Jesus in difficult situations. Resolve to see Jesus in difficult situations. You guys, that is a matter of choice. And this is why I say, you say, well, is it in that verse? Yes, it's in that verse. Look at the passage again. Rejoice in the Lord how often? Always. We are always responding to bad news in great ways because we have Jesus on our side. See, this is the question we always ask, going through one of those valleys, the valley of the shadow, of death even. Why did your day not go well? Why are you now living one of those 2,499 days out of the 2,500? Why is today that way? Because God is doing something wonderful. Now, here's the question. Is he protecting you from a bigger problem? You say, I didn't get the raise. I didn't get the new job. Well, maybe God knows that there's something about money that you're not ready to handle. It's just going to mess you up. You say, I'm messed up now. Okay, going to mess you up more. Maybe there's something about that new job situation, the dynamic, the relational dynamic in that new environment that will just ruin your family, ruin your marriage, ruin your life. I mean, you want that so badly, and God says, no, you don't. Is he strengthening you for a future task? Does he know what's coming down the pike? Does he know that something even more difficult is coming, and he's starting to ramp you up to be able to respond to really bad news in some really great ways? Is he teaching you something important? What are you learning? Is he preparing you for greater impact? Is God going to revolutionize your oikos because he's going to teach you something or ramp you up for something that provides this incredible impact for someone or someones in your oikos? Is he bringing someone else to Jesus because they are now watching you respond to that difficult situation in a great way, and they, for the life of themselves, cannot figure out how you're doing that? God's always doing something. But you know what our problem is? We don't open our eyes to it. We're not watching for that. We're watching for one thing. We're watching for a resolution to our problem, not for the reasons why that problem might be evolving. When we rejoice in the Lord always, this is the cool thing. It's almost as if we know something the rest of the world doesn't know. And you know what that something is? We know how the game ends. And we know that God is always doing something wonderful. Jesus is always the same. You think he's going to be different for you? You think you're the only person in the world he's not going to come through for? I mean, seriously? It's like, after he gathers us all around his throne in eternity, he's going to say, hey, I came through for y'all, except for you. I don't know what happened that day, but you got lost in the shuffle. You kind of slid between the cracks. I mean, I don't even know what to say to you. I'm really sorry that I didn't take care of you. I mean, what a silly thought. When you're in need, you know what? Jesus' grace is always sufficient. When you feel hopeless, his Spirit is always there. When you're confused, his word is always true. When you're lonely, his love never fails. And when you fail, his blood continually saves. Stay the course, man. Y'all gonna be fine. You might not feel like laughing now, but stay the course. One of the greatest theologians of our generation is Woody Allen. He doesn't even know it. I actually don't believe that to be true. This is one of the lines that I loved that he gave us. Comedy equals tragedy plus what? I know. Number 4, fill in the blanks. Reflect on the implications for you. For you. It's easy to claim all the right passages on behalf of other people. Isn't it? When somebody's going through a difficult time, say, hey, kind of keep your chin up. All things work together for good. Those who love God, those who live according to his purpose. Right? It's always easy to give it out when somebody else is struggling. But what about you? What about you? So I love this verse so much. It gives us something else to think about. Rejoice in the Lord always. Don't miss this. I will say it again. Why do I have to say it again? Because what I understand is true for other people actually is true for me too. After Bible scholar Matthew Henry was mugged one day, he's robbed. This is what he wrote in his diary, and I quote, he said, "Let me be thankful first because I was never robbed before." I love that. Second, although they took my purse, they did not take my life. Third, because although they took my all, it wasn't much. And fourth, because it was I who was robbed, not I who robbed. End of quote. That's responding to some bad news in a great way. And understanding their implications for him. Recognizing that Jesus is the source of joy and that he's always doing something wonderful in our lives. You see, when you reflect on that, then the natural response is to laugh, to rejoice. Most of us want to take control of our circumstances. And I'm not trying to be too hard on you, but you want to control too many things. You lament your lack of control over the circumstances you're in so much that you are postponing your ability to be filled with joy. Your obsession with control reflects a desire to be God rather than see God. Now watch this. As long as you insist on being God, you will never see him. Because he is God and you are not. But when you can take a step back and say, Lord, I'm going to give you control. I'm just letting go. Take a step back from holding on so tightly. It's amazing what begins to emerge on the landscape of your lives as you count your blessings, one by one. As you count your blessings and see what God has done. God is working hard on your behalf. He is always at the right hand of the Father, interceding for you. He has deployed every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies so that you can survive the day with joy. Rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again. Rejoice. Now, one more passage, one more verse, last verse of the day, and then I'll be done. Psalm 126, verse 2. This is what I love. Psalmist says this, our mouths are filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. And then it was said among the nations. Now here, the psalmist is speaking as a head of state, so he's mingling with, some pretty heady company. I mean, these guys are representing the nations. Now, you're not the president of the United States, the king of a nation, but you've got your own people, right? Okay. Then it was said among the people who are watching, the Lord has done great things for them. Notice the power in joy, the power in rejoicing. It's a key to changing the world because people notice joyful people. And then they eventually figure out where it's coming from. I love the word then. How are we going to communicate the greatness of God to the worlds we live in? How can we get a then for us? Then our oikos will say, their God is the difference. Their God is the reason that they're experiencing what we're not experiencing. When will they say that? When we are able to have our hearts and even our mouths filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. How powerful would our testimony to the world be if we could do that? Rejoice. You guys are so messed up, all right? All right, let's do it together. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Now, everybody, right now, Close your eyes. You're not reading nothing. Let's say it again. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. You guys just memorized a Bible verse. Congratulations. By the way, what y'all need to do is y'all need to bring that verse back to your conscious thoughts every day this week, especially you Ohio State fans, okay? And the rest of us that are going to have to face obstacles, which, of course, everybody. Father, I thank you. Give us the joy of knowing you and recognizing you and personalizing your activity in our lives. Let us rejoice. Lord, if there's anybody in this auditorium, any of these rooms today who don't know you in a personal way, would they understand that the key to joy in life is a relationship with our Creator, made possible now through the person and work of your Son, Jesus. And with everybody's heads bowed, your eyes closed, I'll say it again, as we say each time. ABC, admit. Can you admit that you're a sinner? B, believe. Can you believe that Jesus is the Savior of the world? C, choose. Can you choose to follow him? Place your faith in Jesus today. And it's a prayer of invitation, reflecting an attitude of your heart and a new direction for your life. Lord, I admit that, I believe that, and I choose that. In Jesus' name. All God's children said, rejoice. Okay, that's good. We'll see you next time.